Hey, Safio Krieger here, and for this video I prepared a deep dive on the individuation journey. We're gonna discuss what it entails and the most important idea in Jungian psychology, the symbol formation process. And this is the last video of my Demystify Jungian Psychology series. So I assume that you understand the basics of the shadow integration process, the psychological types, and also the animus and anima. And if you missed my previous videos, I will link the playlist over here and also down below. And this whole series is based on my book Pistis Demystify Jungian Psychology, and you can claim your copy when you join my newsletter down below. So about a year ago, I got married, and my wife and I decided to spend our honeymoon in Mendoza, Argentina. And this region is famous for producing a few of the best wines in the world. And in January 2024, there was 3 winners ranked in the top 10 of the world. So of course we had to visit at least a few of them. And during these tours, it's common to learn about the story of the family, how everything came to be, as well as the process of making wine. And one story stood out, the tale of Alejandro Vigil and the creation of his bodega El Enemigo, which translates as the enemy. So when Alejandro was entertaining the idea of creating his own bodega, he was already a renowned winemaker, and he was and still is the main consultant of the bodega Catena Zapata, currently #1 in the world. However, despite his undeniable talent, he wasn't sure if he could create a successful brand, and many doubts flooded his mind. One part of him wanted to dare produce a new kind of wine, while the other was afraid of failure and committed to remaining small. And one of Alejandro's best friends witnessed him struggle and told him, "You should name your new bodega El Enemigo, because what you're afraid of lives within and you must overcome this inner struggle." At that moment, Alejandro understood that he was the one standing in his own way and dared to take the first step. He confronted his own shadow, and today El Enemigo occupies the 9th position in the world. Now, I don't know if the story went exactly like that, but it is a great story to illustrate the individuation process and the confrontation with the shadow. Because one thing that few people realize is that it must take place in the real world. Now, when people embark on the self-knowledge journey, there is an initial tendency to withdraw from the external world and spend a lot of time alone reflecting and analyzing their choices and decisions. In fact, many people completely isolate themselves. And although this is only natural in the beginning, this conceals a deep resistance to fully engaging with life and having real experiences. And in that sense, self-knowledge becomes just another coping mechanism. While we are learning about our traumas and theorizing about why we are the way we are, or why our parents did such and such thing, we have an illusory sense of accomplishment and control. And we feel like we are the next Freud or Jung about to revolutionize the entire psychology field. But there's a problem, it's just a theory. It's just another rationalization disconnected from reality, and another way to avoid facing our darkest parts, making tough decisions, and taking a stance in life. And Carl Jung gives an amazing example about a highly intelligent guy who wanted to be analyzed by him. He claimed to have read all of his books and produced an essay about his neurosis. Well, let's say Jung was intrigued and accepted to see him, and even told the guy that his paper was so good that he could publish it. However, he wanted to know more about his personal life. Well, obviously this stroked his ego, and he went on talking about his life. And apparently he traveled quite a lot and lived a luxurious life despite not making a lot of money. And Neil continued to ask questions and found out that this guy was manipulating a poor woman who worked as a teacher to pay for his expenses. And he confessed that she believed they would be together eventually, but he was just leading her on with his lies. Legend says Jung was pissed off and told him that producing a thesis on his neurosis is useless if you don't have a real moral confrontation. Now, the guy refused to see that he was taking advantage of this woman and said that Jung knew nothing about psychology. And I know this is laughable, but it happens all of the time. People do everything they can to avoid dealing with the real problem and making an actual change. As one friend says, they get enamored with their neuroses and even learn all the right psychological terms to justify their lack of action. But you must hammer this in your head. You're not going to solve anything intellectually. Theories are just meant to bring clarity, as change only happens with actions in the real world. This is what Jung writes in Psychology and Alchemy. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. They will practice Indian yoga and all its exercises, observe a strict regimen of diet, learn theosophy by heart, or mechanically repeat mystic texts from the literature of the whole world, all because they cannot get on with themselves and have not the slightest faith that anything useful could ever come out of their own souls. Thus, the soul has gradually been turned into a Nazareth, from which nothing good can come. Therefore, let us fetch it from the four corners of the earth, the more far-fetched and bizarre, the better. Now, I have no wish to disturb such people at their pet pursuits, but when anybody who expects to be taken seriously is deluded enough to think that I use yoga or that I get my patients whenever possible to draw mandalas for the purpose of bringing them to the right point, then I really must protest and tax these people with having read my writings with the most horrible inattention. Now, it's important to understand that individuation takes place in holding a paradox between the demands of the external world, the persona, and the inner world, the soul. So this means that we must find a balance between cultivating our individuality while making concessions in our relationships and contributing to society, since our self-knowledge pursuits are meaningless when they're not brought to the concrete world. Just like the story of Alejandro Vigil, his confrontation with the shadow demanded that he dare to create something new and not only entertain an imaginary vineyard in his mind. The individuation process is about getting our hands dirty and paying the price to become who we truly are. It isn't static and it doesn't have a fixed and final goal, as individuation is an ongoing process and an ideal to be pursued. And here I believe it's important to demystify the myth of being cured, because many people sell this idea that we should be above any suffering and someone who overcame their traumas will live in eternal bliss. I mean, I can't even with these people, because this conceals a childish attitude seeking to be above the human experience and to be shielded from reality. It's just another cop-out. The individuation process demands that we let go of these fantasies of being special snowflake and become more human. It's about achieving completeness rather than illusory perfection. Of course, by dealing with our shadow, we will become more conscious and less reactive, and many things that used to produce suffering will dissipate. We can uncover true self-confidence, autonomy, and authenticity, and all of that translates into simply being happier, accomplishing meaningful work, and have better and healthier relationships. However, we are still human, and suffering is part of life and often an important teacher. And every time we deny important elements of our personality and the human experience, we are fragmented. And funny enough, the exact aspects we judge as bad or inferior are the ones that can redeem our souls. And Jung calls this process of becoming complete the symbol formation process. He says that the saving factor is the symbol, which embraces both conscious and unconscious and unites them. And as with everything in Jungian psychology, this is a dialectical procedure between unconscious and unconscious, in which we allow what once has been demonized by our conscious judgments to become part of our personalities again. And in that sense, von Freund explains that the inner goat is frequently symbolized as something useless, unimportant, and sometimes even feces. Technically speaking, we are referring to holding the paradox between eros and logos, introversion and extroversion, and the four functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, and also dealing with inferior function, represented by the animus and anima. However, everyone has their personal Nazareth, from which we believe nothing good can come from. And we know the conscious attitude has the tendency to be unilateral to develop further, which makes it inevitable to exclude important elements of our personality and experiences that can enrich our lives. In that sense, for the symbol to emerge, part of our conscious attitude has to be sacrificed to allow these unconscious elements to be embodied. Now, the first encounter with the shadow tends to be horrifying, and it feels like we touched evil. However, it's daunting, precisely because it announces the death of our current personality. And this is the moment we realize we must change, and that everything we know about ourselves has to be questioned. And this produces uncertainty and fear of the unknown, as people have the tendency to remain in a known bad situation rather than open themselves to new possibilities, even though it might free them. Also, we have to remember that we are still judging our shadow based on the conscious values that created it. That's why we must commit to a gradual change, and over time, once these contents become conscious, they can be transformed. For instance, overwhelming anger can be turned into the ability to say no, place healthy boundaries, and an important fuel to achieve our goals. For it to happen, we have to cultivate an open attitude toward the unconscious and start seeing these parts differently, also knowing that truth lies somewhere between the unconscious perspective and our conscious judgments. As we've seen, a strong ego is capable of holding and entertaining opposing and complementary truths at the same time. And this attitude toward the unconscious is what allows us to be guided by the self and eventually achieve a sense of completeness. But again, the self only inspires us to follow a certain direction, but it's up to us to accommodate it in our daily lives. The individuation journey is about living the truth of our souls in our creative endeavors, in our professional pursuits, and in the relationships that enrich our lives. Individuation is about living our pistis, unraveling our personal myths, and creating our unique sense of meaning. As Joseph Campbell says, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you truly are. So this video ends the Demystify Jungian Psychology series, and I'll put a link so you can check the rest of the playlist over here and also down below. You can learn more about the shadow integration process, psychological types, active imagination, dream interpretation, and also the animus and anima. But if you want to dive deep, I invite you to check the Audacity University, where you can master Jungian psychology in 1 year to either become your own analyst or integrate these tools into your professional practice. You can learn about everything I mentioned in real depth. If you're looking for a simple step-by-step to integrate the shadow, I invite you to check my accessible course Catabas's The Shadow Integration Manual. And lastly, don't forget to claim your copy of my book Pistis, Demystify Jungian Psychology. You can find all the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and this ends the first season of this channel.